Hello and welcome back to Mystery of Israel Radio. I'm Tom Quinlan, your host, and in these final sessions, we're going to continue to have little excerpts from a talk with Reggie Kelly called Daniel and the Big Picture. You can find this entire talk and a transcript at mysteryofisrael.org. Now we're going to jump in right into the discussion.
My point here is that these prophets all knew this earlier repository of Hebraic faith and expectation. These guys were not just writing their books out of the blue. But one thing I do want to say, they were amazing in one thing. They were terse and let's call it chaste. They kept it to the text. What the Lord gave, they gave. Even when they would puzzle over what they were giving, they gave what the Lord gave. And you can see that with Daniel. There's no way that he didn't make inferences, extrapolations. All we know is from the testimony of the New Testament that says they all pored over these things. They puzzled over these things. What were they doing? They were putting pieces together. And I think they put a lot of pieces together. There was explicit scriptures that add up to one thing, the necessary death of Messiah, not just because of Isaiah 53 verse 8, not just because of Daniel 9:26 or of a psalm in a rich typology or of an afflicted Joseph being typified in the piercing Messiah. All that's there. And then the smiting of the judge, which has capable alternative interpretations, but which one pretty much beginning to see the necessary suffering of the Messiah, particularly at the hand of his own nation. You could begin to put those pieces together. But my point is, even without those, you still had what you would call the theological logic or necessity of a dying Messiah, someone who would occupy a substitutionary suffering role that would bear the brunt, or I call it taking the, quote, hit in the heel of Messiah. He takes the hit. And now, because of that hit he bears, he's able to reverse the curse for everyone else. Eve expected, she was wrong in who she thought it was, but she was right in her expectation that a man, even the Lord, not just someone from the Lord or with the help of the Lord, like our translators try to, helpfully supply. They think they're helping. But this clearly in the text just jumps rightly. I've gotten a man, the Lord. That's all it tells you. And you can even put in the word, even the Lord, or with the help. You can mess with it all you want. But she knew someone unique, and therefore I would submit divine. Someone that was more than mere man. And these are people who had inherited what we learned later. They had all kinds of tradition and not tradition that was handed down, but I mean immediately they knew the conversation with Satan. They knew implications that the later prophets suggest, like we were touching in our conference there in Ohio, Ezekiel and others, Satan's aspiration for the Mount of God and all that. Where could that have come from but Adam and Eve? So when Eve made that statement, a man, even the Lord, she knew someone's taking on this mighty antagonist of God that was so slick and cunning that it could move Adam and Eve from their innocent trust into sin. I mean, this guy knew stuff, but they would have inherited that. That's not just something showing up in a biblical text that we look back and put pieces together. There's a lot of things that Adam and Eve would have understood. My point here is that someone that could take on an angel, this is superhuman stuff. This is not just another person or man or something, has to come and be born of the human line, out of the woman's line. And why does it say seed of the woman? Already we're suggesting something's bypassing the seed of man. And so she's having natural fertility with Adam, obviously. But she's even now jumping the gun and assuming beyond, but she's doing it on the basis of a good and sound expectation. Something has got to be greater than us, that's coming through us, that can reverse a curse of this magnitude. That's big stuff. And this is what the prophets were all looking back to and expecting. So now we've seen Abraham. He's certainly conceiving of this necessary curse reversing seed. And he's thinking it's going to be this miracle boy. Then he looks ahead when the miracle boy is spared. And I think it's exactly there. You can think otherwise, but I personally believe that it's exactly there that he was able, through that very event, not through some premonition, but through that very event, he saw the one who would not be spared. He looked ahead and saw my day, Jesus says, and rejoiced when he saw it and was glad. Why? He saw that it's not my boy, but there must one come who will indeed do what I was thinking about my boy. My boy's being spared. He is going down. And with my boy and with his nation and with me personally, we're going to inherit this land in a way that dying people, dead people can't inherit. What's he talking about here? Not one word about resurrection, but it's all about resurrection. The resurrection of Isaac was clearly inferred. We know that from Hebrews, but it's all about the hope of resurrection. But my point is, it's the hope of resurrection predicated entirely on the expectation of the woman's seed, who would be greater and unique from all other spawn and natural procreation. So now you're moving, and you're picking up the promises of a Davidic king. We're talking no longer is it just the line of Abraham, not even Judah. Now we've come to David, son of Jesse, stem out of the rod of David. So here's Jesse, and he's going to be the heir of all this. He's got a covenant that his children, even if they break them, all these glorious things about it. The early intimations of an everlasting covenant, building and enlarging on the Abrahamic covenant. Not a covenant without conditions, but a covenant that's unilateral in the sense that God himself will see after the fulfillment of those conditions in a way that will not depend on man, which already you have the seminal consciousness of grace and works, the whole issue of God's initiative, his prerogative, his grace versus man's ability to win the race or keep up with the race. So here is God taking these special initiatives and demonstrating his whole character and nature through this nation that he's set apart for himself as a sign nation, an object lesson nation. And so now he's coming to Isaiah. Now we're at where I wanted to go. We're at Isaiah's Song of Emmanuel. And Isaiah is speaking about a current imminent threat. There is an alliance between the king of Syria, not Assyria, but Syria, and of the king of the northern kingdom. So these guys are getting together, and they're going to say, "We're going to take it out on you, Ahaz. Your kingdom's going down. You're going to be brought. You're going to be a conscript. You're going to be brought into this alliance, or you're going to be conquered as a result of your non-compliance." And so commentators tell us that what was really being threatened here was a tremendous danger and threat to the survival of the line of David. And here comes Isaiah with this bold prophecy. He's going to be very bold later with Hezekiah when he's being threatened by Assyria itself. But here we are way back in the early goings of Isaiah's prophecy, and he's inserting the word of God to Ahaz, who is the king of the southern kingdom. Isaiah challenges him. Ask the Lord a sign. Of course, he waxes pious and declines in a way that very much grieves the Lord, of course. Instead, he gave him a choice. Ask a sign. And here's the key word. This was pointed out to me by Spurgeon. Ask the sign, but this is not just any sign. This is a sign of such a magnitude, your little mind can roam from heaven to earth beneath, from heaven above to earth beneath. We want a sign. We want you to request a sign that really is a sign. Isaiah would later talk about the sun moving. Major sign. And so he waxes pious and declines, which was a statement not of faith but of unbelief. And Isaiah says, okay, then, fine. The Lord himself will give you a sign. He will. This virgin will conceive. This virgin, which many commentators, our anti-missionary Jewish friends and others will make great point of the fact, the alternative Hebrew words and so forth. And they'll make great point of the fact that he's talking about a virgin visible, ready to hand, perhaps even his own wife, who had already brought forth children who had these prophetic names. It's such as that before this virgin a child born to this young woman, they're trying to reduce this sign down to something very manageable. When God himself is outdoing Ahaz, for what Ahaz declined to do was give a sign that was in the magnitude of beyond anything, or up to and including anything he could think of in heaven above or in earth beneath. And God says, I'm going to give you a sign. And you're telling me that the sign that God gives is just, okay, here's a local woman who's young, and she's going to have a child. And before that child matures, this northern menace is going to evaporate. You'll no longer be threatened. This is all going to blow over, Ahaz. It's all going to blow over before this child can choose the good and the evil and eat honey and milk or whatever. I forgot the prophecy exactly. When really, look at this. So this is Isaiah. He's expecting a curse-reversing seed of the woman on the throne of David. He's expecting something of the magnitude of the one who will destroy the Antichrist in Isaiah 11, verse 4. He's expecting someone of the magnitude who will rule out of a redeemed Zion, chapter 12. You see what I'm saying here? He's looking for that one. And he's saying, here's the Lord's sign to you. I'm saying to the anti-missionaries and the commentators and all the guys, give me a break. I'm saying that. Give me a break. You got to go back and get what this prophet's thinking. He doesn't have a minimal God like you do, who can only work within the range of a closed system of cause and effect in nature like you do. This is a God who raises the dead in Isaiah's large faith. And he's looking for a sign on the magnitude of something above or heaven beneath. And he's saying it's invested in this woman who's going to have a child, and this is going to be the son of David who's going to reverse the curse. And how can you reverse it unless there's a wound, unless there's a hit in the heel? And Isaiah, I'm just putting this, I'm going to talk about this up here in Isaiah 49 through 53. We're going to get to this curse being reversed. And we're going to find out it's all about with the smiting and despising of my own nation. And we're going to find out that he is cut off from the land of the living. But he doesn't stay cut off. He rises and he sees his seed. And the presence of the Lord prospers in his hand. What is this but the sin reversing curse? Born from the woman's seed, born from David's line, born of a virgin. You see the logic? It's a theological logic. It's not just about battling tit for tat over every little exegetical nuance of all these passages. There is a great case that can be made, and many can be made. I recommend a book by Walter Kaiser called Messiah. I recommend the wonderful work of Michael Brown and others who argue pantheist versus Alma and all the different things. And you can make a case. It's a good and reasonable case. But I'm saying if all that fell short, what doesn't fall short is the theological necessity of a woman's child who is out of David's line, who has bypassed the fall and the power and curse of the fall, who's able to reverse the curse, which means taking on the great dragon that began this whole problem through his seduction of the first pair. Major stuff here. So let's get on the scale of Hebraic magnitude and get off this limited trucking along here with these imaginative apocalyptic scenarios that really you don't really believe, because these prophets believe this. So now we're coming to Daniel now. And so we're talking about this day of small things, and yet we're looking for a day of the Lord. We're always looking for this great climactic final day of the Lord. Now, the Old Testament wouldn't use language like mystery of iniquity. We'll leave that to Paul. But they understood very well that this final aggressor would try to take the holy hill of God. And while he's in the attempt of doing that, the Lord's going to come back to Zion and rule and reign. Israel will be at the end of their power. Moses said, there's a tribulation that's coming when they'll seek me with their whole heart. Then I'll circumcise their heart. And then and only then, because there's not just a meager little remnant, but because the nation's wholly born today, then we'll have the land forever. Isaiah will talk about a new heavens and new earth, but they would not distinguish. They would blend all that. What they would see very clearly and beyond gainsay, they would see a climactic transitional tribulation that would be, they had lived in tribulation. They knew their people were appointed to tribulation. They knew they were under a time of the heel of the Gentiles, not just with Rome, but for a long time. And that would continue until we could call it the redemption or the end of the gulag, the end of the exile. And so all the prophets are waiting for that transition at the Great Tribulation, a tribulation significantly like no other, and that would end in nothing less than short of the climactic, age-ending day of the Lord, resurrection of the dead, destruction of Antichrist, and so on. Out of Zion would rule a king with a rod of iron. Everything they're putting, though, is significantly on the other side of that tribulation. Israel's delivered at the end of the worst tribulation of history. They all knew that. That's common stock.
I hate to break in here, but this is all we have time for today. Remember, you can find this entire message at mysteryofisrael.org. Until next time, this is Mystery of Israel Radio.